These are my ideas about a spectrum from knowing people to supporting them to grow as part of thinking about bringing your whole self to work. And what's different is that each of these would be shared with the team. This is not the same as lots of different individual development activities. Each of those would be shared. So if I go through them, over on this side here are different processes, tools and techniques for people to know themselves better and share their whole self at work. So the easiest way in really is a mini profile. So here's mine, and it's got just two sections here: what people like and admire about me and what matters to me. So some personal information there about my garden, being by the sea, yoga, meditation, what kind of films I watch. So that's the sort of entry level sharing. Then the more detailed one would be a one-page profile, which has similar columns: what people like and admire about me, what matters to me, but it also includes how best to support me. And as you can see, there's a lot more detail than the 5 bullets in the initial profile. Coming slightly over to this side, and of course what's the arrow here is for vulnerability, so a greater sense of disclosure and moving from just sharing information to talking about how you want to grow at work. So the next one is history. So this is a history timeline, starting from a very first paid or voluntary role to now, and then including aspirations. It's got a section for my skills, my interests, what's worked and not worked about my previous roles, as well as my aspirations. And we often use this to then build social contracts or team agreements, asking what could we agree together to maintain what's worked for you in the past, or make it more likely that's happened, and to address what's not worked. We're using a slightly different process around goal planning. So rather than it just being based on professional goals and career, our future focus looks at what experiences you want to have, how you want to grow and develop, and where you want to contribute in order to decide what your focus might be over the next year. And then if we look at Simon Sinek's work around having a clear purpose or a why, we've done some work in the past around helping people identify that using something called a TAP process that I think Netflix or somebody else uses. So that's another possibility. And there's something called a map of meaning, which I've used in the past, which has some similarities to values profiles. So these are the values profiles that we use with each new starter in wellbeing teams. And it's a questionnaire process that's online. It's through Monescence, and it identifies your top 10 values, which values are control values, relationship values, development values, and which ones are satiable. And that can also tell you what your worldviews are, and that takes you into a different level of sharing and information. So also on this level here are ideas from the DDO book. So one of the organisations talked about asking people to identify whether they leaned humble or arrogant, and then using that in working together. So for example, if you lent to humble, then you might want to put yourself forward or be inviting to do things that stretch your confidence and abilities in that area. For example, showing people around the organisation or giving presentations. And again, if you lean arrogant, making sure you're paying attention to that and holding back and not being the first person to speak in meetings, etc. Something else that was from the DDO book is things that I'm good at, things to watch out for, which is a version of a one-page profile that's a strength-based thing. Here's 5 things I'm good at. But the things to watch out for are things that aren't my strengths that I'm developing in as well. So I think that's really useful. I think thinking about the areas that I want to develop and give me feedback on, and that relates to these 2 things here, which is the immunity to change map, which was one of the techniques often pointed to in the DDO book, which talks about your behavioural goals, what you're doing or not doing that work against your goals, competing commitments, and then how you're going to test that out. And I've taken that to explore it via confirmation practices that are growth focused. So you might have a series of statements. For example, I'm asking for feedback to consider how I can grow and develop. And then on a weekly or fortnightly basis, you might give yourself a score out of that. Explain why you gave yourself a score and what you intend to do to develop in that area over the next 2 weeks. And these will be done typically in a team meeting or in a one-to-one with a buddy and then shared in a team meeting. So these are just starters for 10. So if we're thinking about what tools and practices can we use in teams to help them share more about themselves, from one-page profiles, histories, where you want to focus in the future experiences, etc., right through to things that demand a much greater sense of vulnerability, immunity change maps, and how you share those with the team. So as I said, a start of a 10, there'll be lots more, but I think it might be interesting to map those out so that we're clear what the full toolkit could look like.